Hi everyone, delonewolf here. Welcome back to another EVE Online discussion video. In today's video I want to talk a little bit and take a look at the dev blog on the upcoming balance changes that CCP is going to bring to EVE Online. So lots of people seem very happy about this, and I myself also see lots of positives here. I would highly recommend that if you want to either follow along or give feedback to CCP, especially I think for capital and super capital pilots, that might be the thing to do, that you take a look at it yourself. So you can always go to eveonline.com, press on the articles link, which will bring you to this page, and down here we have the dev blogs with a dev blog on Amsterdam, which is coming this weekend, and then of course we also have the spring balance update that is incoming. So let's take a look at that dev blog. This is a balance patch that is planned for April, and it has a heavy focus on capital balance. So it's not all capitals, there's some sub-capital changes as well, but it mostly focuses of course on trying to do something about the problems with capital ships that are currently really dominating the game. And the first one is really basically a major one. It's the FAXes, or the Force Auxiliary support ships, that are basically brought out in such big numbers that the losing side can sometimes not destroy a single ship, which becomes very frustrating. And so the big change is basically this graph here. CCP is introducing diminishing returns on the more reps are active on a target. Very interesting change. I've seen the idea before, I've thought about the idea before as well, and I think it's been one of you viewers that has also, or several of you viewers that has also mentioned this as a possible solution or a possible balance change that CCP could try to do in order to reduce the effectiveness of the FAXes on a single target without making them completely meaningless. So here you can basically see that for a capital repair ship, you start with one at 100%, and when you get close to 300 you cap out at around 10% effectiveness for your reps. Or it's not 300 ships, but I think it's the number of reps. Yep, right there. Overall rep percentage strength against the number of reps. So I can imagine that some development has had to go into developing this system for EVE Online. It's never really been designed that way before in the game, but a very important one, and I think overall this might make capital engagements a bit more interesting, a bit more of a brawl where you can actually take out each other's ships, because no matter the more FAX, the more reps are put on the primary target, the less effective they are, and so you have a better chance of actually breaking them. There's also a nice comparison graph, the total amount that is being repaired right now on TQ compared to what 250 reps are going to repair when this balance patch comes in. So very nice change. Now they did think about a possible exploit, of course, that people can imagine would become very popular immediately in EVE Online. It is to bring a whole fleet of tiny little reppers yourself, and then just decrease all the effectiveness to its lowest bracket just by repping the enemy yourself. That would be super unintuitive. So the smaller rep sizes are going to have lower diminishing returns. Here, for instance, they show the graphs for the logistics cruisers. Start at 100%, again at 300, we cap out at 40%, and apparently I think here is the relative difference. So yeah, do you want to bring lots of FAXes, or do you want to also bring in a wing of logistics cruisers? I think it makes a lot of sense that the optimal setup might not be just pour more FAXes onto the battlefield, but have some of these sub-cap fleets as well. So very interesting, very good change. Not really sure what this represented. Let's see, and for the same reason, cruiser side reps diminish more slowly. You won't be able to sabotage enemy fleets by firing up to rep them with small repairs. You can see this here, where the first few reps used are fax sized, then 25 small reps are used, then more fax reps are added. The second group of fax reps are still over 90% effective, as they would have been if the small reps were never added. So this is basically on an individual basis. Fax reps have their own diminishing returns, and cruiser reps or smaller reps have their own, and they work independently from each other. So yeah, a cruiser reps might actually become very popular in bigger engagements because of this, of course. The second part is not just the repping in big capital brawls, but it's also apparently the effectiveness of these larger ships against smaller sub-capitals, especially the high-angle weapons. Apparently, people like to put lots of those on the Titans, which put out 5k DPS per second each. Oof, that's a lot, and high-angle weapon Titans are too strong and too flexible. So they're gonna tone that down for the Titans while leaving them strong for Dreadnoughts, which aren't nearly as problematic as Titans at the moment. Change is reduce the damage multiplier for all high-angle weapons by 50% and give a corresponding 100% increase to high-angle weapons in siege mode. So basically cutting the DPS by 50% for high-angle weapons on Titans. After that, we've got the carrier. The big change here would be that they're making fighters less effective against smaller targets, so an increased explosion radius for all fighters by 50% and a reduced explosion velocity by 30%. And here the idea is bring in a tackler or something like that, bring in some support to slow down your targets in order to attack them with fighters. Will that happen? Honestly, this might just be small enough that I think carrier ratting and things like that will still be the exact same, but we'll see. CCP has also said that this is not the final balance patch or anything like that. This is ongoing work. Hopefully they can stay on the ball. Another change is the insurance changes. I think it was like 50% for supers and 33% for capital ships. Reduction in the ISK that you have to pay for your insurance, but also your payout, which should mean that losses become more significant. And there was one more change. Oh, this one right here. So I didn't even know that this existed, but apparently there is something called a networked sensor array that allows for super fast locking for carriers. That seems to be very useful, especially when you get tackled. So what tends to happen apparently is that someone comes in on a ratting carrier and then they immediately counter that by using the network sensor array, having a very fast lock and then destroying the tackler before the fleet could come in and start working on the carrier. So to change that up, to make it a bit more risky to use it while the network sensor array is active, carriers or the ships will no longer be able to warp off. So yeah, lots of changes to make it a bit more risky, make it a bit more balanced, and especially I really like, I'm a big fan of these diminishing returns on remote reps incoming. I think that's a very, very good solution for the overpoweredness of fax at the moment. So hopefully this can shake things up a little bit in nullsec. But let's move on to some sub-capital balance updates as well. Some of these are really tiny and then some of them are pretty big actually. Medium beam lasers across the board get an increased optimal range of 10%. That's actually pretty big for lots of Amar ships especially. Very, very interesting. Will hopefully bring this weapon system in line a little bit, and I'll need to check it out. I do think that I've got a couple of Amar ships that I potentially want to use as exploration ships, but against Sancha, immediate optimal range problems become apparent, of course, because of their E-War. So could be interesting to give another laser-based exploration ship a go. Then we've got some smaller changes here. The Harbinger gets an increased power grid. The Abaddon, that's actually a big one here. Turret damage bonus increased to 7.5% from 5%. That's actually a significant increase in damage. The Abaddon is an awesome looking ship, which we've probably not seen that often in nullsec in the last couple of months, I would say. So just a straight up damage increase for the Abaddon. Next up, we've got the Cyclone, slight CPU increase, and then this one I like a lot. Caracal Navy issue, drone bay and bandwidth increased to 25 25 cubic meters. I think it was 0 if I'm not mistaken. And the main reason why I did not really like the Caracal Navy issue as an exploration platform, this fixes that completely. Very, very interesting in my opinion. It was difficult to find a good baseline Kaldari hull in order to do exploration the way I do with the Gila, with the Ishtar, you know, feel comfortable of having really good damage application with your missiles, but also having your drones to deal with the smaller stuff, the more annoying stuff, and things like that. So I think this could be a huge fix for the Caracal Navy issue as an exploration ship. Definitely something that I'll have to take a look at as well when the balance patch is out. Now the Corax, massive buff. PG increased to 53, was 48. It feels really small. I'm not really sure. Is there maybe something that tips over when it comes to the fitting? If you have any knowledge on that, definitely post it in the comments. But this feels like a super minor buff to the Corax, and not really the reason to come back to the game that I saw on Reddit. Next up, Vexor Navy issue, and we also have some balances on the downside, not just some buffs here. Bonus to drone max velocity has been removed. Signature radius increased to 145. Obviously, an attempt to nerf the AFK kiting Vexor Navy issues that are currently ratting up a storm in Nullsec as well. Bonus to drone max velocity obviously might mean that some more drones get destroyed during that activity, and the signature radius also makes it a bit trickier to just speed tank everything. Then the Gila drone HP roll bonus reduced to 250%, was 500%. I don't think that this really does much to the Gila as the exploration platform that I use it for. I think as long as the damage is there, it is not a problem. But for the Abyss, of course, this is a pretty big change that might bring the Gila down a notch in popularity. Because, of course, something that is really helpful in there is when the rats in the Abyss go after your drones, it's got that super strong tank. It takes DPS away from you, so takes that pressure off of your own tank, and allowing you to basically go through that content a lot more quickly and effectively. If you start losing some Gila drones, that is a big problem because you only have 2 of them, and then you need to switch out to, well, are you going to take 8 of the same drone just to run the Abyss? At the moment it feels so good to have all options straight in your drone base. So potentially I think that this is mostly aimed at the popularity of the Gila in the Abyss myself. And then we get a Ferox, also a bit nerfed I think. Max velocity reduced, mass increased, agility reduced, and yeah, reduced to 0.66, was 0.63. Is that a reduction? Not exactly sure. And then the signature radius is going up as well. So the Ferox is nerfed a little bit. Next up, because there's lots of balance changes coming in April, here we've got Rorcal is being nerfed a bit as well, both on the defenses and on the capabilities of the Excavator drones. So for the defenses, it's basically a reduction in how long they can panic a little bit, and also in their shield booster amount from their industrial core. This one, maybe still a bit too timid. I think for a lot of people this will be a bit too timid. The Excavator mining drone base yield is decreased to 800 cubic meters, was 1000 cubic meters. Ice harvest drone corresponding change in its cycle time. And then of course the volume of the drones gets increased so that you can't store that many of them in a mobile tractor unit anymore, I think. Or was it in a mobile depot anymore? So they're attempting to balance this, but this feels like a very shy first attempt, and they really don't want to completely gut the Rorcal, basically, which I can't blame you. It's a very expensive ship, of course, and you can only use it in Nullsec. So you know, if they really make it in line with, let's say, an Orca, then of course they would have to, for instance, allow it to be used everywhere, and reduce the cost by quite a bit. So that is still gonna be the king of mining. I think that makes a lot of sense, but first few steps from CCP to try and balance out the Rorcal's absolute dominance at the moment. And it's also said here that it adds to the problem of just an unsustainable amount of mineral supply in the EVOL economy at the moment. So they are looking at it from that perspective as well, which I think is very important to do, of course. So we'll be watching closely to see how these changes impact the mining landscape in nullsec and the distribution of mining ships used, and we'll be ready to make more tweaks if needed to either buff or nerf the Rorqual and encourage a healthy EVE economy. I think that one is especially important. Yeah, too bad that CCP doesn't have an economist on the payroll anymore, I think, because it's super important for this game, of course, especially for the longevity of the game. Keeping things balanced and healthy is definitely important. And then we're not done yet. There's also a roadmap for the summer. So let's see, starting in May, they'll focus on new ships and module content. Rather than change the existing balance, you can expect at least one new ship and some other new toys. More details coming on these very soon. I'm personally going to assume that it's gonna be a Triglavian ship, but who knows? I think that in the video, the Triglavian video, there was like one with multiple disintegrators or something like that. So could be interesting, perhaps a Tech 2 Triglavian cruiser or something like that, but who knows? Perhaps it's more than one, because it does say at least one new ship, so maybe they have other plans as well. In July, they're planning to introduce some long anticipated implant sets, interesting, and also picking back up with the module tier side efforts, which basically aims to make the modules more logical when it comes to some of them. And of course, this is not all we have planned for capitals or for improving game balance in general, but we would love to hear your thoughts on these changes. And then of course, yeah, hopefully they can keep up this effort. So lots of people were quite positive about this. They were having lots of fun with CCP Falcon on Reddit as well, but I myself think that this is definitely a big step in the right direction. We've got some tweaks to sub-capitals, which I think are definitely needed to keep the meta fresh and to keep the ships in line a little bit. Some changes to the Rorqual that are positive, maybe a bit too small in my personal opinion, but understandably so. And then especially the capital and super capital changes, I think overall might make these types of fights a bit more interesting again in nullsec, because if it is indeed so that once you hit a certain threshold of faxes, you know, the losing side just doesn't destroy anything. On top of that, you get the insurance payouts that are so big that it hardly feels like a loss. That's not a healthy situation to try and get some conflict going in nullsec with these massive ships, and so these changes from my perspective seem to be very positive. As I've said, if you want to, and especially if you're active in these arenas, definitely take a look at the dev blog and give a CCP your feedback. That's gonna be it for this video, guys. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you all next time.